The first step is to download your pattern. Select your file according to your paper format and the size you wish to make. Print your pattern at 100% scale. There is a scale test included on the first page of your pattern to ensure you have printed correctly. Trim around the thin black border and use clear sticky tape to piece the pages together. There is a layout included in the instruction guide to help you lay out all the pages correctly. Trim around each individual pattern piece and lay the pattern onto the fabric. You can follow the cutting layout included in the instructions to make the most economical use of your fabric. Cut according to the individual instructions marked on each of the pieces. For this project, I wanted to work with this embroidered tulle, but it is far too sheer as it is. So, using a long stitch length, I have basted it to a heavier cotton. I've also added a lightweight, fusible interfacing to give the bodice more structure. Once all this is done, I am treating all layers as one piece to go ahead as normal. Place the back pieces on top of the front pieces with the right sides together, matching at the shoulders. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Repeat for both pairs. Repeat this step for the front and back lining pieces. Place the lining pieces on top of the main pieces with the right sides together. Match along the neckline and the armhole and stitch together using a 6 mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. Using a small pair of scissors, clip into the curves of the seam allowance. Repeat for the other set so that you have a pair. Match together between the notches along the lowest edge of the bodice. Stitch between the notches only using a 6 mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. Using a pair of scissors, clip into the seam allowance at the notches. Turn the garment through to the right side and press well around the neckline, armholes and the small section we have just sewn at the bottom. Ensure the seam allowance is completely unfolded and flat around the notches along the lowest edge. Working on just one side for now, fold the piece in half so that the side seams align. Match along the bottom edge, picking up the main layer only, leaving the lining separate for now. Pin together and stitch along the lower edge between the side seam all the way to the middle. Your stitching will meet up with the stitching at the centre front edge that has already been stitched. Stitch using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We will now repeat this step, but for the lining pieces. Match the lining pieces together with the right sides touching one another. Pin the seam in place and stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Again, you'll be stitching from the junction all the way to the side seam. Once you have pulled the piece back through to the right side, all the seams should be internal with no seam allowances showing from the right side. Pick up the second bodice piece and thread it through the small opening that has now been created at the front of the stitched bodice. We now have to repeat the step of stitching the folded bodice along the lowest edge, but this time with the other side of the bodice intertwined at the knot while you sew. You can see I'm matching up the main layer first and stitching that first. And then, just as we did previously, I'm matching up the lining with the right sides together and stitching along that seam. Pull the garment all the way through to the right side. Open out the side seams on the back bodice piece. Pin together at the side seams at the front bodice piece so that the right sides are together and the front bodice piece is sandwiched between the back main piece and the back lining pieces. The back side seam will be 6 mm or 1/4 inch longer than the front side seam and will overhang at the bottom edge. This is correct. Stitch along the side seam using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then, once you get to the bottom, pivot and stitch along the bottom edge using a 6 mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. You'll be stitching from the side seam to the centre back edge. Pull the back bodice through to the right side. Give the whole garment a really good press and then make sure you've repeated this for the other side seam. All the seam allowances will be internal at the side seam now. Overlock or zigzag stitch the centre back edges separately. Pin each side of your open-ended zipper to the centre back edge. Don't worry if your zipper is too long like mine, we'll cut it down in the next steps. Pin in place from the bottom edge or the base of the zipper. Stitch in place using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Stitch as close as possible to the zipper teeth for a neat invisible finish. Once you've done this for both sides of the zipper, cut the zipper at 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch above the top edge of the garment. Fold down the top edge of the zipper to the wrong side and turn the entire zipper back so that the tape is on the inside of the garment and conceals the top edge of the zipper teeth. Using a hand sewing needle, catch the top edge of the zipper to secure it down in place. This is how it looks from both sides when it's finished. All done!